This is the Professional Hypnotherapists Podcast, session number 0011. Joe Keaney of the Institute of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy, Cork City, Ireland. Welcome to the Professional Hypnotherapists Podcast, a production of the European Association of Professional Hypnotherapists. That's eaph.ie. Welcome to you to another edition of the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast. I'm your host, Aidan Noon. Joe Keaney has been and continues to be a giant in the world of hypnotherapy and hypnopsychotherapy in Ireland. Listen as Joe charts for us his beginnings in hypnotherapy and brings us up to today, sharing with us his vision for the future and much, much more, all on today's edition of the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast. Joe Keaney, welcome to the Professional Hypnotherapist Podcast.
Thank you, Aidan. It's a pleasure to be a part of your podcast endeavours.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, let's go back in time, if you don't mind, back to, when you got this idea in your head or maybe the fire in your belly with regard to, starting up a hypnotherapy school in Ireland, because for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, for what it's worth, you really started a revolution in hypnotherapy, and I mean revolution in the best possible sense.
I never had a grow, if you like, to do hypnosis or anything to do with hypnosis. Initially, I started off in mechanical engineering. And I was working in a local firm, and in around the early 80s, similar to today, they had recessions and so forth. But I said I did not want to go back into industry again. You can give 101%, and they still want more. There was no real satisfaction in it. And prior to that, I had a bit of a spiritual experience. So I was sort of praying or asking God or the Holy Spirit just to guide me in the right career that I should go in. And I decided to do chiropractic in London, chiropractic training. And while I was over there, one day this man came in with a withered hand, and the trainer had the ability to use hypnosis, and he put him into trance, and within a few moments he was using his hand fine. Subsequently, I found out that he did some regression therapy with him to find out that he was back in the war, the Second World War, and he was killing Germans and with his right hand, and he had an awful lot of guilt related to that. So then I began to inquire, what's the best way to go for me, because this sort of excited my imagination a bit. And there was only one school I could see at the time, so-called school, and that was in Bournemouth. A man called Neil French in Bournemouth was giving some trainings on it. So I connected up with him, and subsequently I would call him the father of modern hypnoanalysis, Neil French, down there. I did some other courses then with a guy called Bill Atkinson Ball in London. He was an amazing man. And then I started off my own private practice here in Cork, and I was getting tremendous results and lots of clients from the get-go, just due to 2 small adverts in the local newspapers. And so, something else was happening as well. There was a guy called Dr. Brown. He was a famous doctor in Cork that used hypnosis, and he died around the same time. So I felt I was taking over from him because a lot of these patients came to me, and I learned a great deal from them. Anyway, after about 4 or 5 years, I decided to see could I train people in this. And I developed the 12-lesson approach, whereby people would get lessons every few weeks and answer questions. All our graduates are exam qualified. So that's how I started this, because people were asking me to teach them how to do the work. Even the late Jack Gibson in Nice, who has documented over 4,000 operations without anesthesia. That's all been documented. I used to send people to me for trainings because he didn't actually train people. He just, just performed therapy at that stage. He was retired. So that's how I started off the trainings, and it just snowballed ever since. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel I've done it all before in some other life or some other dimension, or there's some hand working with me in this type of thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And you then started what was known as the Irish School of Ethical and Analytical Hypnotherapy. And great emphasis, Joe, on ethical. Maybe you develop that point for me.
Yeah. In fact, today now, if you joined our course in the foundation course, we didn't have it in your day at Eden. I'm not sure when you graduated, Eden. Was it before?
1995.
Before 2000, yeah. So there's lots of things in place today that may not have been in place back then. But in the foundation course, we actually give each student a code of ethics and standards, which we've developed over the years. Articles of Association, Code of Ethics.
Well, we had that back then, Joe. That was very much, in vogue.
Oh, yeah, you were just given it, and you're told to abide by it as best you could. And if you had any questions. But now the students are asked to study it specifically and answer questions on it.
Okay.
It's part of their foundational course. So I think for two reasons. Number one, we had to get rid of the idea of stage hypnosis and clinical hypnosis. And so to do that, you'd have to have a code of ethics and standards which would forbid people from doing any stage hypnosis whatsoever. And also to say that it is psychotherapy, like counseling psychotherapy, that they have a code of ethics and standards, and we need to follow those as well. But some of the codes of ethics and standards are specific to hypnotherapists. For example, if you're seeing somebody that's under 18 or 16, you need a guardian or a parent there with them while you're working with them, that type of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's so important that they're grounded in ethics in the beginning, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that was a big emphasis, as you say, in terms of that, you're dealing with people, purely your clients, on an ethical basis in that, because prior to this, I suppose, hypnosis, had, let's say, a negative connotation attached to it.
Yeah, and maybe even today it still does have this. I think of that a bit like drugs, in the sense that you go to a doctor and the doctor will prescribe medication and drugs for you, which hopefully will help you. And, you can have drugs then being used positively, or you can have drugs being used negatively, such as recreational drugs and so forth. So I think of it, I use that metaphor sometimes to describe the differences in it. And I suppose if it wasn't for stage hypnosis, hypnosis may have died a death, around the turn of the century, the last century. And a lot of stage hypnotists, in fairness to them, do a bit of clinical work as well. I'm not saying one thing against them or not, but our job is to work in a clinical situation with people. Yeah. Even the new model of therapy that we've developed in ICHP over the last 20 years, we've developed a thing called the BCHAPS model, model of hypno psychotherapy. And that talks about, it's brief, clinical hypnoanalytical psychotherapy, solution focused. So it's clinical, in other words, it's clinical hypnosis that we are focusing on. Yeah.
And indeed, the unique aspect, I suppose, of your school is that, it's hypnoanalytical as opposed to suggestion alone hypnosis.
Oh, yes. Sometimes I use the metaphor with people of a weed. You have a weed growing, and if you come along and you cut the weed off at the top without taking up the roots, that weed is going to grow bigger and stronger and have more roots, and will come back even double the size that it was previously. So we have to get at the root cause of the problem, the roots of the weeds, if you like, the roots of the problems that have been presented to us. So that's why I started this work mainly using hypnoanalysis and very little suggestion therapy in the beginning. But now I've sort of mixed it around a bit, whereby in the first 4 sessions would be a solution-focused in the here and now, if you like, with clients coming with problems. For example, if they're coming with depression, one needs to work on what's causing the depression in the here and now, the cognitive distortions, and work on those a little bit. If the problem's going to sleep or anxiety or addiction problems, we need to work on that in the here and now. And then afterwards, after about session 4, to go into 8 sessions or thereabouts of free association hypnoanalysis. Very similar, very little difference to the time that you did it, that we're doing it here now today, where clients are freely associating. But you need to deal with the here and now first, and then go back into the past.
Okay.
To find the causes.
And that's the BCHAPS model, as you mentioned.
That's the BCHAPS, yeah. And BCHAPS simply means brief, meaning that we're not into normal psychotherapy where they say you've got to do it for an indefinite period of time, or 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it's a brief model where hopefully it'll be, if people are going over 20 sessions, they need to be talking to their supervisor. And supervision is another big thing that we're in, that we train our graduates in as well. It's clinical, meaning that it's done in a clinical way, like any other counseling or psychotherapy or psychology. Hypnoanalytical psychotherapy. So we're into cause and effect constantly, cause and effect. There must be reasons for these traumas that people have. And it's got to be solution focused, that we're looking for solutions here. A lot of people going to counseling and psychotherapy and that type of thing think that the counselor or the psychotherapist or the hypnotherapist is going to somehow cure them. That's not the case. One's got to put the responsibility back on the client in some way to make the changes. And they've got to make the changes one way or the other. And that's where the focus in session 1, we use the well-formed outcomes in trance. We put people in the trance and we do a well-formed outcome with them. And with that well-formed outcome, they're put back totally in control of making their changes, not the therapist make the changes for them. So it's brief, clinical, hypnoanalytical psychotherapy, solution-focused.
Okay.
And there's a focus there, the phase 1, if you like, is focused therapy in hypnosis in the here and now. And then we need to go back into the past after those 4. It could be 3 sessions normally, but sometimes if people are depressed or have other issues, you need to do another few sessions there. And then into hypnoanalysis. We get tremendous results with this model. And also in session 2, we ask the therapist to record the session for the client so they can play it on their own at home, the solution focus elements of it. And thank God for mobile phones. So all I have to do, I just ask the client to bring along your mobile phone and have a audio recording app on it, and put it on my desk. And when I start the hypnotic part, I just play record, and they play that on their own at home. So that's been very, very successful over the last number of years, doing it that way.
Okay.
Also, I have a model in my head sometimes. I have a red car in the consulting room here, and it's a dinky car. And I normally ask the client, look, if you brought this car to a garage, what's the first thing a mechanic needs to do to see the problem in the engine? And hopefully they'll say he's got to open the bonnet. And I said, that's exactly right. That's all hypnosis is. It's opening the bonnet. We're putting ideas in, but also we're taking out the root causes of them to make the car run better. That everybody else in therapy, using therapy, are trying to fix the car with the bonnet down. They're talking to the car, they're shouting to the car, they're putting medication into the tank, they're electrifying the car, you name it, they're using it. But it's not going to get anywhere. No changes are going to be made in the long run here. One needs to open the engine. That's where the hypnosis comes in. And that's so important to bring about changes. It's their subconscious mind causing the problem. Therefore, it is only there subconscious mind is going to cure it. I'm not going to cure it. Hypnosis is not going to cure it, but it's the interaction between the therapist and the client, getting at the root causes of what's going on.
Okay. Now, you mentioned root cause and you mentioned reasons for their behavior. So what if the people, those out there who would be skeptical and say, well, okay, you get the root cause, and what about that? What's going to happen then if you get the root cause? Is it magic?
Once we find the root cause of the problem, what we got to realize is it's emotion causes symptomology. It's repressed emotion generally that causes symptoms. It's those traumas that have happened to people in the past that they may not even be aware of that causes problems. But once you release the memory and the emotion of that, with that will come a change. Emotional induced symptoms tend to cause organic symptoms, and that can be those organic symptoms can be cancers, it can be arthritis. For example, I had a client recently who had osteoarthritis to discover that 2 years prior to the onset of this, somebody very close to her partner died, and it took about 2 years for this to come to the fore. And once you release the memory and the emotion, I did some bereavement therapy and trance. With that came a dissipation of that. Now, the Simmonsons have done tremendous research on major diseases being presented, such as cancers and other physical problems. And they discovered that a trauma has occurred about 2 years before the onset of the symptoms. So that's like the cause and effects in the here and now. I also had another client recently, I don't know, the last 2 years ago, I think, and she had tremendous addiction problems. She's in her mid-40s, and to discover that in her mother's womb, the mother was impregnated. She didn't want the child, really. The partner didn't want the child. He gave monies for her to have an abortion. But between the jigs and the reels, anyway, she was born, and life goes on. But once we release the memories and the emotions of that feelings of rejection in the womb and carrying those right through her life, with that came a change on it in the symptomology. So it's cause and effects. If people have problems, there must be reasons for them.
And indeed, it points, Joe, to the whole connectedness, the connectedness between, the psyche, the brain, the mind, and the body, so that if there's something not right in the mind, it has, as we say, the symptomology in the body.
Oh, absolutely. The reason I had the red car downstairs, I made sure it was red, because of all the blushers that are coming to me. I remember in my first 3 to 5 years of private practice, the amount of blushers that came at me was unbelievable. And I didn't have any tools to work with them. We didn't have the internet in those days to Google it. And even today, if you Google it, how to deal with blushers, you won't find any answers. I'm the only therapist that I know of that actually advertises help with blushing. Now, blushing is a horrendous problem, and people don't realize it. There's people out there who are pure geniuses, and they won't get beyond the first rung of the ladder because they're full of social anxiety because of the problem. There's people out there who are drug addicts, alcoholics, they won't even leave their houses because they have problems with blushing. So the only tool I had at the time was hypnoanalysis and going back and finding the causes of those things. And in every case, there was some sort of abuse there. There was some guilt relating to sexual stuff or other stuff. And once we released those, with that came a change for them. Today now I got more up-to-date skills to work with it, if you like, such as you can put people into hypnosis and just the law of reverse effects is at work in that symptomology, such as they're always saying to themselves, I hope I don't go red. And I make fun of that with the client when they come in to see me. I say, how are you doing your symptom? And they have no idea how they're doing the symptom. So hopefully they'll say, I'm saying to myself, I hope I don't go red. So I say to them, that's what you're doing. That's how you're doing it. It's the law of reverse effects at work. So we need to do the opposite. I hope I don't go white. I hope I don't go white. So we build suggestions around that initially to get the client on board,
Okay. Now, you're in excess of 30 years in practice, and with your school, with your institute in Cork. But not only have you a school in Ireland, but you have let's say branches throughout the world. You've trained people throughout the world.
Yeah, we had a school that was still operating out of Sweden, Germany, and Australia. So, like Peter George came to us around the year 2000, I think, and he did a course with us in the Marino Institute of Education in Dublin. At that stage, we were doing about a 2-week in-house course, a practical course on the subject. He had already done the diploma at home. And he's helped us tremendously over the years, putting together, in the last number of years, the master program. And that's been quite successful. And a lot of our graduates have gone all around the world. For example, I got a phone call recently or email from somebody in Japan who's wanting some help setting up private practice or whatever. People in Spain, people in America, Australia, as you mentioned. So we've graduates all over the place, thank God.
Yeah.
And they hopefully they're using the work in a positive way to benefit those people that they need to benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and in Ireland, the process by which a person who wants to get trained in hypnotherapy and hypnoanalysis, maybe you go through that for us briefly.
I think our website now is hypnosisera.com. We have details of the courses up there. And there's also a link to send an email to us, to ichp@hypnosisera.com.
Mm-hmm.
It's also built into that. So once they send that, we will forward them a brochure, if you like, through the email, and an application form. And what they do then is fill that out and maybe pay a booking fee and send it in to us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky in the sense that I have 2 good ex-graduates working with me now here, Jennifer Malone and James White, and they're totally committed to the BCHAPS model and teaching it. So they're helping me a great deal, and both in the classroom and the paperwork behind the scenes, mm-hmm. and the technology involved. So once people send that in, they need to, first of all, sign up to the foundation program, and that's performed both in Dublin and in Cork, and during the lockdown times we had it on Zoom, the practical parts of it. And once they've completed the foundation course, then there's the diploma course after that, and then the advanced diploma course. And then we should have an upgrade program, but it's a while since we've done that. And then we got a master program, but we completed our first master program, I think, 2 years ago. So between the lockdowns and getting Peter George back from Australia to here, it has been a problem. Mm-hmm. And there hasn't been a great demand for it either. So hopefully in a few years' time we can put on the next 4 years of the master program. It's a very, very interesting program. I've learned a tremendous amount, both by giving it and being a student of it as well. And I learned a great deal going through it. It covers all aspects of hypno psychotherapy. But even if it was a professor in psychotherapy coming to us, we say to that professor, look, you have to do the foundational course. That's where it all starts. And you have to do that and to begin the process. And I think that those courses take about a year each or thereabouts. So some of them overlap as well. Mm-hmm. And we go to the basics, through the basics of meeting the client, intake forms, doing tests with them or demonstrations of the power of their imagination, doing well-formed outcomes and that kind of thing with them in trance also. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there's lots of talk, lots of I suppose, speculation or whatever you might call it out there with regard to the whole, the whole controlling of, or the regularization of therapies, counseling, hypnotherapy, psychotherapy. What's your take on that, Joe, with vis-a-vis, hypnoanalysis?
It started, the process has started, but it's only started for psychotherapists and counselors specific,
Mm-hmm.
And I'd ask anyone who's anyway interested in it to, first of all, go to the Social Care Professional Act of 2005, where the mechanism by which people are registered is clearly outlined. The government clearly outlines it. Now, this will be a government thing, but the therapist will pay for it. I don't know how much it's going to cost the therapist in the long run to have this process, because it's a huge, massive process setting up these boards.
Yeah.
It'll be the
Corey, of course, is one of them, isn't it?
There's lots of people helping at the moment to put it together, but there's a core group there that works specifically with the Social Care Professional Act, and no association out there can take all the other associations will fall away to a certain extent, to be registered on this board. Now, we've already, with James White and Jennifer Malone and myself, we've already been requested by government to send in, the outline of our courses, what we teach and the length of time, etc., and where do we come on the HETAC fan, if you like, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So we sent those details into them. Now, I'm only guessing here. This thing could take another 2-3 years to do. But we're going from the idea of, again, it's the Institute of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy. So we have psychotherapy in our trainings and in our membership and in our graduates. And but I would say to them, initially I was thinking that there could be a hypnotherapy board or something put in there, but no, that's not possible, because it's such a huge task to put together these boards. It could take a long time, and to get people in place, etc. So I'm going from the angle of that it's enhanced psychotherapy, what we're doing. That it's hypnopsychotherapy, yes, that's who we are, but we're getting in under the psychotherapy counseling umbrella as enhanced psychotherapy. That's what we do, and hopefully we get a credit on that. And hopefully on the back of that, any graduates in the past may be grandfathered in if they meet some of the criteria. Mm-hmm. Because I know in every training that I've given over the years that I've made sure that everyone got an attendance certificate. You follow?
Yeah.
Or hours to say they've been attending these things. So that should all stand to people. And of course, if they've done any other training since then, that should go on board as well. Supervision is a big thing also. I'm sure we did supervision in your day, but we brought us supervision logbooks that we've given to people. And I enjoy doing some supervision with the graduates now and again. So it's coming on stream. It is in train, if you like. When it will happen, it's a whole process that people have got to get through. I don't think they've even agreed on a definition of psychotherapy. That's one of the questions we need to ask at the next meeting. Can you please give me a definition of psychotherapy?
Yeah.
But to get an agreed definition, you could be here for 10 years trying to get over that conundrum. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to grasp that nettle. But anyway, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
What's really, in all of this, what's really required is how we can help our clients change. That's the central part of what we're doing.
Yeah, I suppose my question emanated from the concern that perhaps an existing hypnotherapist, hypnopsychotherapist, hypnoanalyst, any concerns they may have in terms of going forward, because it seems that the title psychotherapist is going to be protected. What's your take on that?
Yes, indeed, and we can guess that's what will happen once the boards are up and running, once the government have enacted the Social Care Professional Act in Parliament, they will be protected. But What we are doing, as I said, is enhanced psychotherapy. That's what hypno psychotherapy is about. Um, now, it, I, once I, I think I used to run the postgraduate association maybe 15 years ago. I had my hands on the pulse of what was going on. But since then, I've given up the association part of it because it could be at cross purposes and it may not be too ethical to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the graduates, I think, formed into two associations, and they had psychotherapy in their titles initially, but then they had fear, like you're mentioning, they had fear that you wouldn't be able to perform hypnosis or something like this, or you wouldn't be able to perform psychotherapy. But I think they jumped the gun there a little bit. You crossed the bridge,
Okay.
before you came to it, in my opinion. So you have no fear whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned, that like hypnosis itself, you could say, is not registered at the moment, but that doesn't prevent you from performing hypnoanalysis or hypno, whatever you call yourself, hypnosis. That title is not protected at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're hoping to do is to, we've always called ourselves psychotherapists, and that's what we're doing, psychotherapy. And I'm confident that our grouping, and we were the first grouping to make a submission to the Minister for Health at the time, and we created documents around that. I think the Hypnotherapy Psychotherapy Examiners Board, or something like that we called it.
Mm.
The Hypnotherapy Psychotherapy Register, that's what we called it. And it's non-statutory, so we set up that. And I think they're using some of our ideas that we gave them on that.
Mm.
So no one has a fear of anything here,
Okay.
in my opinion. And people can get in my opinion. And I'm delighted we're having this discussion, Aidan, because I think any graduate of mine or of the ICHP can still get in with this when it's open for membership. If you can prove that you've been in supervision, if you prove you've been trained to whatever level, if you prove that you've gone to postgraduate training and in that type of thing, and therefore, and also in the workshops you've done with me over the years, I think I had a postgraduate training on it or something like this. Our master classes is the word I use, I think, on those forms that you got at the time.
Yeah.
So that all goes to prove what you're doing. So it's a matter of every therapist putting together a bit of a portfolio for themselves, showing supervision, showing ongoing training, showing their initial training, and any master programs they've completed. And that'll all go towards entrance into the psychotherapy world under that umbrella, and they can be grandfathered in that way.
Mm-hmm. I suppose, Joe, the whole, I suppose, impetus for the legislation is the protection of the public.
Sure.
And ultimately that's what it's all about, is to do no harm, as the doctor's oath, they take this oath of doing no harm. And similarly, as therapists, we want to do no harm. We only just want to help our clients in that sense. So it's a case of protecting the public and being as ethical as we possibly can be.
I'd agree with you. And doctors with their boards have difficulties with this because the doctors generally should do supervision. That's been recommended, but rarely would they do that, and some of them are suffering from burnout and all that kind of thing. So they will have, as far as I'm aware, that when the board is being set up, there will be a code of ethics attached to it, and the board will be responsible for anyone who has committed any misdemeanor or broken ethics or whatever. The board will deal with that. There'll be a special board for that, and that will be outside of any current associations that are operating at the moment. You follow? The board will take those responsibilities themselves, and be like doctors. They've got to go to the medical council or whatever to get a talking to, or for them to explain their position. So it'll be a similar idea. So this is why I say at the very beginning of teaching people hypnosis, they need to have their grounding in ethics from the get-go, and it is about the client. in all of this, the client is so important. And I think our work will be invaluable in the long run, because the fall away from therapy is astronomical. The people go to therapy for the first time, you don't see them again. This is outside our therapy generally. They come with an expectation that the psychologist or the psychiatrist is going to help them to figure out that they're only filling out a load of forms initially, and medication may be prescribed. So you don't see them coming there again. So there's not the dropout rate is astronomical with psychotherapy. And I'm thinking with the advent of neuroscience and better understanding of the polyvagal theory, that will allow a lot of people to understand our work even better, because all the research into neuroscience is usually done in hypnosis or trance. So they're all beginning to come around to the idea that it's a subconscious mind action on the client is causing problems. And they can see this happening in real time when they're doing various brain scans with people.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned research. How important is research in terms of the hypnotherapy that we do?
The whole course of the master program is based on the current research, what works for whom, that's everything. And it's all evidence-based medicine policies that are being used there, evidence-based therapy. So the research is tremendously important in those areas. If you just take one area, I think, which is IBS, which I thought initially, as a young hypnotherapist, I said, there's no way you can cure irritable bowel syndrome. That's not possible. It's to cure something organically that's there. And so hypnotherapy for irritable bowel syndrome has a 75% success rate, and this is based on evidence-based medicine over 15 years, and it has a 75% success rate. Now, this symptom is so bad that 1 in 5 people have it. Half of them have it so bad they can't go to work. And I think Dr. Peter Warwell of Manchester University or Manchester Hospital has a special clinic there, if you like, to deal with people with IBS. And it's got the best results of all the therapies involved. But even just for that one symptom, it's very helpful. Mm-hmm. They are over, they are over several hundreds of thousands of papers, if you like, on research into hypnosis. You spend the rest of your life looking at it, because all the people doing postgraduate courses think that to use hypnosis and get something done with the mind is a cool thing to do, and so there's a lot of things there. I think in the United States, the Public Health Service Agency mandated in '79 to provide guidelines for the treatment of depression, for example, which is a horrendous problem again. The amount of suicides, parasuicides, that I'm seeing at the moment is going through the roof. I've never seen anything like it. That's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
So they were looking into this depression, and they looked at the literature between 1975 and 1990, and they looked at some 100,000 pieces of research. Over 3,500 of the best studies were selected to form guidelines, which were peer-reviewed by 73 professional societies, including the British Psychiatric Society and the British Psychological Society. And they come up with guidelines for the effective treatment. And one of the guidelines they came up with through that research. Now, bear in mind in all of this that hypnosis is enhanced psychotherapy. We're enhancing the psychotherapy that's being done at the moment.
Okay.
No matter what psychotherapy you're doing, we're just enhancing it. And they discovered that therapy should be active. The client is there, they're interacting with it. They're not just lying down, just contemplating their navel, so to speak. This is where the solution focus bit comes in. It's time limited. meaning that in our case, it's maybe on average 12 sessions. So it's time limited. It's not going on forever. It's focused on current problems. That's where you have cause and effect in the now, in the Beauchamp's model, and aimed at symptom resolution, not personality change. So they're trying to focus on the symptoms that are being presented at the moment. Mm-hmm. So psychotherapy should be considered as a first-line approach in depression, or in mild or moderate depressions. So that's, I'm not sure I'm answering your question that way, but...
no, thank you.
That's the way I would see it anyway.
Yeah, the future, Joe. What's the future in your mind? What's your vision for the future?
My vision for the future is that that people would be proud of the use of hypnosis, be proud of their hypnotherapists, and the therapists would be trained to such a standard that they would be able to deal with most presenting symptoms coming into their clinic. And they would keep the clients focused from the get-go. Like, I was amazed recently at a guy who came to me about 2 months ago. He's still coming, and he's coming for cocaine addiction. But in the first session with him, this is just before I did the introductory talk and all the rest. I just started to work with him because he's a young man, and his whole life will be destroyed if he doesn't get a handle on it. So we did a technique which we call the stop and replace technique, and I got him to get to see a stop sign, and he came up with a stop sign, and I said, look, get some emotion in that stop sign. And the emotion he came up with, I thought was brilliant, was I see behind the stop sign a graveyard of my unfulfilled dreams. You know, a graveyard, and that sort of motivated him. And he hasn't taken coke since. He's coming on a weekly basis to me. We're dealing with other issues as well. So the future of it is that. Also, you're probably the first guy I'm saying it to outside this office, but I patented a word, and it may sound weird, but the word is hypno-natural. Hypno-natural. How does that sound to you, Aidan, the word hypno-natural?
Sounds natural.
Actually, I did say it in class, the foundation class last month.
Yeah. Okay.
And
but you have that word on your website.
I'm not sure.
Yes, it is. It's there. I read it. Hypno-natural.
I am not sure, but I patented it anyway. But I said it in class, and this guy from Brazil piped up and he said, "It sounds very green, Mr. Keaney. Very green."
Now, Joe, you originally were the Irish School of Ethical and Analytical Hypnotherapy, but now you're known as the Institute of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy. What was the impetus to change the name?
Some of my graduates, maybe including your good self, sort of said to me, look, we've got to have a smattering of a third level education in this. Do you follow? Because it was up to that level, you know. I didn't realize it at the time, and it wasn't an issue for me at the time. But all the schools in Britain and in America were all called schools. Do you follow? Yeah. And I was just going along with what everybody else was doing. And when it came to my awareness that, look, this is third year stuff, you know, or third level stuff, then I said, look, the institute might be the way to go. And with an institute, you can cover many things, such as a postgraduate association in there as well, and other bits and pieces you could put in under the umbrella of an institute. Okay. So that was the impetus as well. And also to keep in mind that I was thinking in the long run also that part of my dreams, which is unfulfilled, would be to have a university or third level college or something like this that would be specific to hypnosis and hypnotherapy and hypno psychotherapy. And having the word institute there might help that along a little bit.
Excellent.
So there were some of the reasons.
That was Joe Keaney, the director of the Institute of Clinical Hypnotherapy and Psychotherapy in Cork City in Ireland. Thank you, Joe, for being with me today.
Okay, it's a pleasure. And I'm hoping whoever hears this, especially my graduates, I wish them all the best. One of the policies I have in my head, be it right, be it wrong, is that once we graduate people from here, I have a policy in my mind not to contact them again. Do you follow? Not to get involved in anything they're doing. And I have the same policy with clients once they finish therapy, because of transference and stuff, that I don't make contact with them whatsoever, because they need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. And I miss out on a lot, of what the graduates are doing, what they're up to, the buzz, because of that policy. Be that right, be that wrong, I'm not sure. So, look, I wish you, Aidan, the very best, and the association you belong to, the very best as well. And hopefully it'll be upwards and onwards for hypno psychotherapy in Ireland and hypnosis in Ireland. And I think I don't think our graduates have any fear of registration if they did focus on those points that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And that could be the subject of another conversation at some other time.
Indeed.
If they're worried about it. But they have no fear whatsoever in continuing to use hypnosis that may be registered somewhere else down the line at another time.
All right, Joe Keaney, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
You have been listening to the Professional Hypnotherapists Podcast. Please stop what you're doing now and start exploring to finding beneficial solutions for you and your future at eaph.ie. You know you want to make positive, beneficial change in your life, and yet you may not have the right solutions for yourself right now. Discover how you too, right now, can make that change through ethical hypnotherapy at eaph.ie.